Okay, welcome everybody. We are here in the Oberlin College and Conservatory. My name is Doug Younger. I am the founder and CEO of Three Steps Forward, but I'm changing my hat today, and I am joining a very special client of mine now from an academic perspective. Today, we are starting the Oberlin Executive Speaker Series. This series is dedicated to bringing founders and entrepreneurs to the community of Oberlin to talk about how we're going to make the world better together. This is the first pilot guest of today. I would request that anybody on the Zoom, please mute your mic so that we can get as many insights as we can from our special guest over the next hour. Now, to introduce my guest, just a little bit about her. This is Dr. Clayborne, and this is also, to me, Liz, a friend. And she is a physician, a founder, and an entrepreneur. We're going to get into what she does. But Liz, welcome to the Oberlin Executive Speaker Series.
Thank you, Doug. I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. So Liz, why don't to kick this off, let's kind of let the Oberlin community get to know you a little bit. So maybe you want to explain a little bit about what you practice in medicine and then how you have gone into entrepreneurism.
Sure. I get to ask this question a lot because it's not that common that you'll see somebody leave like an academic emergency medicine career and pursue, being a CEO and founder of a startup. So I'm an emergency medicine physician, currently a faculty member with the University of Maryland, and I do still practice clinically at least once a week. I get into the ER and, into the trenches, as we say. But when I was in training at GW, which is where I trained in Washington, D.C., I was really struck by the number of patients that would show up to the ER for nosebleeds. We see on average about 500,000 ER visits a year for nosebleeds, and that's in hospital-based ERs, not even including urgent care. So I really couldn't believe that people would show up and wait 3 or 4 hours to, deal with their nosebleed and visit a physician to help them with that problem. And oftentimes we didn't have great solutions for patients either inside or outside the hospital. And so it got me thinking that there needs to be a better solution for nosebleed emergencies. And so I came up with a solution now called NasaClip, which we're kind of marketing as the Band-Aid of nosebleeds. This is what it looks like. So typically when patients come to the ER for nosebleeds, they'll be making a lot of mistakes with their nosebleed treatment. They'll pinch the wrong part of their nose. They put their head back instead of forward. And I just was like, this is like such an easy problem to solve if you know the correct steps to treat. So I devised a device that combines sponges that can be medicated along with external compression, and it makes it easy to stop nosebleeds in any environment. And I'll quickly show you what it looks like so then you can understand my entrepreneurial journey and how I've now stepped over to being a full-time CEO and founder. So if you're having a nosebleed, you'd simply clear your nose of clot, you'd insert these nasal sponges, rotate it into place, and pinch shut. And just like that, you have firm, constant, uninterrupted pressure in the right anatomic location. And you can see I'm hands-free, my mouth's clear, my eyes are clear. I could go on with my activities even. I leave this in place 10 to 20 minutes and then simply release the clip and check for bleeding. The sponges can even be rinsed off and reinserted if you're still oozing. So it really gives the doctor's solution to nosebleeds and conveniently places it in the pocket of anyone, no matter where they are.
Well,
So
Liz,
as a resident, I thought about this. Yeah, go ahead.
so on a personal anecdote, a lot of my Twist of Fate listeners don't know that I used to be an athlete, right? I used to play tennis. Now and I used to play basketball. In basketball, I know that I've seen nosebleeds and I've had nosebleeds that the only solution out there is that they actually stick a tampon up your nose.
Yep.
That's not me being funny. I'm saying that's what I've seen. So what you are showing me, like this is now addressing a complete a home remedy that is not clinically proven, right? Like there's no solution for a nosebleed other than using some of these other things or pinching your nose and that you hear about.
That's right, Doug. Most people, if you ask them what they do for a nosebleed, they're like, I don't know, I pinch my nose, I use tissue, I use gauze, or I stuff a tampon up my nose. I had during this last World Cup, everyone sent me the picture of the player from Canada that had a major nosebleed during a game and was running around the field with a tampon in his nose. Now he knows, hopefully, because we reached out to him as well as all of our other sports medicine colleagues, that you can use NasaClip. And really, it is supposed to be a first line nosebleed rescue device that can be used in any environment. So it's helpful at home, in a clinic, a daycare, a school, or a sporting field. So I totally understand for you as a former athlete, especially in sports like basketball, boxing, wrestling, where nosebleeds are really common, there's a lot of utility. I, of course, created it for me as a doctor because this was a cumbersome, challenging problem to deal with. Even though in general we would discharge over 90% of our patients, it still took a lot of time and effort to do that. And I wanted there to be an easier solution for me as a physician in the ER. So it started as an idea, and I will go into some detail about how I really got there. But ultimately now I run my company, NasaClip, as a full-time CEO and founder. And it was a long journey getting this idea to fruition, but we officially launched in the market late last year. And now I'm really excited to introduce the Band-Aid of nosebleeds to the US and beyond.
Yeah, which is making the world better. Now, just, when you're working as a physician, I mean, are you seeing nosebleeds every day? Like, is this a common thing because to me, like, that's not a good use of your time. Like, like a nosebleed, like, I mean, I guess if it's leads to some major acute loss, blood loss, but a standard nosebleed shouldn't go to the ER, correct?
Yeah, so a lot of times people just don't know what to do when they have a nosebleed, and it's actually most common in kids 2 to 10, on older adults 55 to 80 who are on blood thinners. And if you think about it, that's the least likely population to manage bleeding well. There's a lot of anxiety and panic involved, but in general, the most common cause of nosebleeds is just dry air. So right now is like the prime time nosebleed season. And so I do see nosebleeds a lot in the winter, up to like once a week. If you talk to most ER docs, this is something that they don't necessarily see every day. A school nurse might see it every day. But me as an ER doc, for you to be bleeding bad enough to come to the ER, it's still something I see maybe, a few times a month. So all of us are really familiar with it. And I just learned that if people knew how to appropriately treat nosebleeds and where they came from and what the causes were, they'd be a lot less likely to have to show up to the ER. And it would allow me to like dedicate my time to taking care of patients that might have more serious issues going on. But of course, when you're bleeding, I understand why you think it's an emergency, which is why I wanted to bring NasaClip to the market to help kind of people deal with that bloody emergency more easily.
Okay, this is great. Now, today actually and I think I have a few students even on the Zoom, and I know that some actually accepted and are coming to the room. This is our first class, actually. I'm teaching a business 118 class, Liz, that's called Digital Marketing and Innovation. And, the theme of the day we're talking about is how to develop a positive attitude, which means glass half full. And, as I'm a founder, I know as an entrepreneur, you get gut punched every day. Like a lot of people, that's something I want to share with the Oberlin students is that, it may look glamorous and everybody thinks we're, Tony Stark or something like this, but it's not like that. Like you're really building things when they're with ambiguity, and you're building without a lot of capital. So if you don't mind sharing let's talk a little bit about how you have faced adversity as a physician and entrepreneur. And I think a lot of the students could benefit from listening to you on, some of the things you faced in your career and as you came to your own.
Yeah, I like to share about my entrepreneurial journey a lot because I do think that there's a lot of misconceptions about, first of all, like how you make this work and what's hard and easy about it. A lot of times being a founder and an entrepreneur can be lonely because no one is traveling the path exactly with you, right? You might have a few teammates, but oftentimes in the beginning, it's just you. I was fortunate enough to have a co-founder, but I was like, the full-time person who was dedicated to this in the very beginning. And part of what I share when I talk about how NasaClip kind of had its birth was that it happened at a very tumultuous time in the world. So in 2020, which is really the time when I started to focus on NasaClip full time and venture away from my academic emergency career, which had its own set of challenges that we can talk about later, COVID hit. And at the time that COVID hit in March of 2020, I was 6 months pregnant. So just that in and of itself was a challenge. I was a pregnant frontline ER doctor in the hardest hit hospital of the state of Maryland, PG County Hospital. We had so much COVID volume at our hospital that they had to reopen a closing hospital just to deal with how many COVID positive patients we had. And if you can think way back to the beginning of COVID, this is when there was not enough PPE. Testing took 10 days. We had no idea what was going on. We had no idea how dangerous it was. And so I was pregnant, and there were two other physician colleagues of mine that were also pregnant. And at the time, we didn't really know how risky that was, for our unborn child. And as it turns out, it probably was. But, we do what we need to as ER doctors. We tend to actually always be the ones that are expected to put ourselves at risk, especially when something like a pandemic is hitting. And I just knew that, people were dying left and right, and I needed to be there, needed to be at work. At the time, because of this, I did quite a bit of national media because I thought it was really important to represent an articulate, well-educated Black female physician that was speaking to, the patient population that I served, which was primarily Black. And there was a lot of fear and mistrust potentially of the healthcare system during this time. So that was really important. Now, what people don't know is I had on the back burner started kind of dedicating more time to NasaClip, and then COVID hit and disrupted all that. However, when I safely delivered my second child, my daughter, in May of 2020, which was like my goal, I then spent my maternity leave doing an accelerator program for my company. I literally started the accelerator program when I started leave. And then I like went away for maybe 2 or 3 days, delivered her, came back, and was on Zoom breastfeeding a newborn infant because it was my only opportunity to participate in this accelerator program. And I just had to do it. I mean, they required full-time participation. And the only time that I could be full-time was during my maternity leave. So I had just come off the whirlwind experience of being like during, working in COVID, having to like be in a chaotic ER environment and then come home and undress in the garage and shower before I was, in contact with my 19-month-old at the time. And then I had a newborn infant. And I think that my cohort thought I was like a little bit crazy to do this, but I find that it's not an uncommon story for people to kind of make a way out of no way when they have a dream that they're trying to realize. And so I went through all of that. I got this accelerator program, and I had capital. It was called the Builder Fund with TEDCO, which is kind of a Maryland state-based venture fund. And they were the first organization to give me some primary capital that allowed me to develop my first prototype. And then from there, I was able to raise my first $1.1 million in fundraising. So it was a necessary step, but a challenging one. And I tell people this because I often think that as a CEO and startup that is a female, and especially a Black female, the odds are really stacked against us. Like currently, only 2% of venture capital goes to women. Yeah. Only 0.34% of that is going to Black women. So in general, we do not get funded at all. And so it was a very big deal for me to get some initial capital and then use that momentum to continue fundraising. And I had to do it while I was still working full-time as an ER doctor, coming out of maternity leave and having 2 small children at home. And then the last thing I'll add, just because I used to not share this, but I think it's important because I think people will learn and grow from kind of my story, is I also was going through a divorce at this time. So I had significant strife at home. I had a challenging working environment. I was already kind of maxed out as a mom. But I think that, all of this adversity really pushed me to make this dream a reality. And I am really grateful now when I look back at what I went through, because that resilience and that kind of innovation and the ability for me to kind of navigate the early stages of my company was fueled by this like desire to be successful in extreme circumstances. And that has served me very well as I've continued to progress as a CEO now.
Okay, fantastic. And to the Oberlin community, if you're not familiar with the accelerators, this is programs that are set up to meet founders and entrepreneurs. You go through some form of boot camp, which you could look at a lot like what you're going through in college now. It's accreditation. You're learning skills. They're helping you learn. And, obviously Liz did the impossible, which is to raise $1 million, as she alluded to, which is very challenging for a lot of women in startups. So now, Liz, I want to ask you, as this is an academic format. Um, could you tell the audience more about your training as a physician and what it's, I mean, you went through med school you and I have some academic shared
Right.
history there. So could you tell them a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I mentioned I'm an emergency physician. And so, I think that some people understand you go to a lot of school to become a physician, but to really understand what it takes to be a physician, it starts early on. Like you obviously need to have reasonable grades and, extracurricular activities. Med school gets increasingly more competitive. It's interesting because when I was in college, I think I was interested in pursuing medicine, but I didn't want to do a science-based major. I went to Duke for undergrad, and initially I was going to major in biomedical engineering because I thought like that was going to be my path to make sure I could get into med school. And then I got into college, and I just didn't want to spend all my elective time taking like, math and science courses. So
Mm-hmm.
I decided to do a non-science major that I developed my own curriculum at Duke. They call it Program 2. And I was actually sponsored out of the Department of Religion. And I technically graduated with a BA in medical ethics and religion, which I think has served as a foundation for me having this very different, atypical, non-traditional route to medicine. However, I will say it has been instrumental in making me the kind of clinician I am now because I recognized early on that first of all, medicine and religion have always been closely tied, right? In other cultures, medicine men are the healers. A lot of people, when they have severe medical emergencies, are going to like rely on their faith and spirituality to get them through those tough times. So I always liked that interface. Plus, I was really interested in bioethics and ethics issues. So I did that non-science major. I then went to Washington, D.C. and did a 2-year research fellowship at the National Human Genome Research Institute as an ERTA fellow, which was a great opportunity to kind of really understand a little bit of the research and science that accompanies medicine and a lot of the politics that go into what happens with our healthcare system. And after that, I went to medical school at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio, and I did a dual degree program in medicine and bioethics. So I completed a master's in bioethics at the same time I was in medical school. I primarily did that because it was free if I could get it all done within 4 years. But again, it definitely made my medical education unique because at the same time I was doing all of my, courses and requirements and clinicals as a medical student, I also was like writing philosophy papers and understanding healthcare structure and answering really interesting questions about ethics. So I think that has set me up to have this, unique career in medicine that looks at, a multifaceted approach to my career and what I'm interested in. I trained at GW, as I mentioned, in emergency medicine. So that was a 4-year residency. I was chief resident in my last year. And then when I graduated, I joined faculty at University of Maryland, primarily first to focus on, ethics and health policy, which is, I think, a really popular topic in the DMV. So that had always been, my desire is to be a physician that had an impact on the overall healthcare system, because I always recognized that outside of my relationship with patients, there was a larger system and community at work that was always going to impact their health more substantially than anything that I could do in an acute intervention. And I was interested in changing those systems. So I always have had a kind of broad, non-traditional approach. And I tell people that story because I think people think there's always like only one path forward to pursuing a career in medicine or one thing you can do as an MD. And I think that my career has shown that there is a convoluted path that you can take to medicine. There's a lot of different ways that you can learn about healing people. And certainly now my transition from being an academic ER doc to a CEO and founder has also been really meaningful and I think is going to have a huge impact on the health of people globally.
Yeah, fantastic. Fantastic. So then your, your passion, your interest, your willingness to make the world better it really is coming out in this conversation for me. And for you to be such an inspirational person, I have to assume there has been some inspiring people or mentors or people that you have looked up to. And that could be hopeful for a lot of the students. Could you share one who was special to you, and then how did you find them?
Mm-hmm. I mentioned to anyone from, high school through college, medical school, and even residency, it is so important for you to identify multiple mentors and to kind of make sure you have actually mentors at different stages in their career. So I'll give you an example. When I was in college, I had a mentor who was an MD, PhD at Duke. Her name was Chi, and she just took me under her wing. I found her through kind of one of the Black organizations that connect people who were kind of pre-med with those who were at the next stage of their career. And I think that that was such an important relationship because she showed me what was possible and she wasn't that far removed from the stage that I was at. And so I could see what that path forward is and what the options are and what the obstacles are. And that was a really important relationship for me to have in college. But I also had mentors at the time that were more established in their career, who were like physicians that were practicing. And I always was the type of student who would reach out to people when they offered, if I went to a lecture and they shared their email and said, get in contact with me, you'd be shocked because now I do that a lot. People actually don't ever follow up and don't ask for advice. And you'd be amazed that if you do that, if you are someone who takes initiative, if you go to a lecture that's interesting or you join an organization and there's someone that seems like, they're really impressive and they're doing all these things that they don't have time for you, if you take the initiative to talk to them, they will make time for you because I make time for people who reach out to me. And so I had people at different stages. I would say Chi was one in college. And then when I was at NIH doing training, I had a PI, a principal investigator there, Vince Bonham, who was actually a JD, but had a lot of experience in kind of healthcare and research. And he was a huge advocate for me and making sure that I was like pursuing my goals as a physician, but also getting great exposure within the NIH ecosystem and the DMV in general. And to this day, I still meet up with Vince and have coffee with him and let him know what I'm doing with my career. And he always is lending me insights, both personally and professionally, about how to move myself forward. And I still talk to Chi, who, has a family now and lives in New York. So I think at every stage, I had an example of a mentor that I reached out to, but I always wanted to make sure that I had someone who was a little closer, like five, ish years ahead of me, and then someone who was maybe 10 to 15 years ahead. And then, of course, if you get the opportunity to speak to someone at the end of their career, that's also really important because they'll reflect back and tell you what they would have done differently and things that they would pay attention to and how to utilize their time in a way that would be most meaningful.
Fantastic. And thank you for sharing. So then those were enablers, but then obviously you have, as you were alluding to earlier, like there is a unfair and unequitable proportion of venture dollar that goes to women. But for you as a female and a Black female, would you share? Because one thing, more than 50% of my students in my cohort are either women or someone of color. So could you talk a little bit about some of those things and how you maintained a positive outlook despite the adversity?
Yeah, a lot of times if you're just going into medicine, it's going to be challenging. If you're going into entrepreneurship, it's going to be challenging. And so I have a set of like five what I call tips that I think have really distilled what I think is important anytime you're kind of venturing into something that is going to be a marathon and not a sprint. And the first is that you have to enjoy the journey along the way. I think early on when I was in college and I'm studying for MCAT and then I get into med school and I'm studying for, my steps and then I'm trying to pass my boards, there was always some next really, really significant hurdle. And I used to say to myself, like, okay, I can relax when I'm done with this. Like when I get done with this exam, when I pass this test, when I get this job, after I have a baby, which we know that didn't work out, right? You're going to be more busy. So what I learned is that you have to enjoy yourself along the way. Like it is a marathon, not a sprint. So you got to reward yourself for the small things. When I was in medical school, I had a close school group of friends, and we used to do this thing called cabin trip after every major exam. We'd go on like Airbnb or VRBO and we'd rent a cabin in the middle of nowhere. We'd go shopping for a bunch of drinks and food. And every time we passed a major exam as a group, we'd go there and let loose for like a whole weekend, turn off our phones, go on hikes, hang out, cook for each other. And that was so important to me navigating the journey of going through med school. And I think that that is analogous to what you have to do anytime you're on any journey. You have to give yourself little rewards for every kind of step you take. And sometimes it's just like, I got through a tough day or I got through a tough week. So I'm going to get a massage, or I'm going to meet up with a friend, or, whatever it is that allows you to relax, you have to do that. The second thing is that you're going to fail. So like, don't be upset when things don't go right. They're going to go wrong. And I think that you alluded to this earlier, Doug, it's about your perspective. So I had to start looking at failures as opportunities for growth, not just as like negative things. And what I share with people, because I think it's important for them to know, is I failed my emergency medicine boards the first time I took them by 1 point. And it was devastating at the time. I literally thought I was not going to bounce back. I mean, it was like the end of the world, most embarrassing, terrible thing that could ever happen. But I had to buckle down and really figure out how to better take the exam because I knew I was a strong clinician. I was chief resident. It wasn't like I didn't think I was a good doc. I just was not performing well, taking this board exam. But that was something I needed in order to be board certified. So I look at that now as instead of this catastrophic issue and mistake, it was an opportunity for growth that's now made me a better, stronger test taker and giving me confidence in other, ways. And then the third one is kind of more about wellness. Like I think you have to know yourself in order to have good wellness. So for me, I went to med school in Cleveland and I learned that I do not like cloudy weather. Like the overcast weather is just a no-go for me. I will never, ever again be able to live in a place like Cleveland. Like I grew up in Denver. I learned apparently that Colorado has 300 days of sunshine a year, more than California or Florida. And that is important to my wellness. So when I made a decision about where to do my training and where to take an academic job and where I'm going to, found my company, geography is important. And I think that that's reasonable. I like being around my family, right? I like taking beach vacations. I make time for those things because I've learned myself and I know what wellness I need. And that's different for everyone. And it is super important that you know yourself and what makes you tick so that you can support yourself. And then the last thing that, the last two things I'll mention is that taking risks can be fun and rewarding. I mentioned a lot that I had kind of a very non-traditional career, but a lot of people would be scared to like do a non-traditional major or, to do a dual degree program. And I looked at them more like, these might be interesting. And I think that it might have some potential benefits. And it did, right? Having a non-traditional major made it easier for me to get in med school. I stood out significantly because I did that. And then even as a dual degree in med school, that was hugely beneficial to me applying to residency and then having a faculty position. So it's not only interesting, but it can be advantageous if you can take that risk and kind of walk through open doors of opportunity that are less traditional. And then the last thing I'll bring up is that you should always remember that in many ways, what you're doing is your ancestors' wildest dreams. So I know a lot of my personal history, all the way back to the emancipated slave ancestors on my dad's side that were from North Carolina and then traveled to Indiana. And I think about that generation and like what they went through to like transition from being slaves to, land owning, working Americans. And I think about how it would blow their mind to know that their great granddaughter was going to be a physician, a CEO, a national speaker. And I think that it's important sometimes to pause and think about how far you've already come just by being who you are. And that's another thing I always use when things are challenging, to just look back and reflect on that.
And I think celebrating wins is hard to do for overachievers like yourself. So I have many of them in my class. So definitely take it. Listen to Dr. Clayborne here. Take a chance to celebrate your successes and to celebrate your heritage. I really like that you added that. Now,
Black History Month.
Yeah, Black History Month, right? Big shout out for that. So then, one thing I think that a lot of students, whether they're low income or they come from, let's say, backgrounds that had challenges, and going into environments like college where they have to change their social circles. They have to change the people that they're around. And in many cases, I advocate to surround yourself with positive people because that can help you keep a very positive, optimistic outlook. Now, in your time in any way, did you have to change your social circles or to change kind of who you congregated with? Just curious if you experienced that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's important both from kind of a emotional standpoint as well as a professional standpoint. So when you surround yourself by other people who are as successful or more successful than you, then you're not impressed when you're doing something that is, standard or below average for that group. If you surround yourself by people who are not really performing or not doing what you think, you want to achieve, then you might be thinking that you're doing pretty awesome, but that's all contextual, right? It's based on the group of people you've been surrounding yourself with. So you should always be striving to make your social circles with, people that are impressive because it will help you strive to that next level. And also you have to remember that, sometimes it's not just about them being successful, but like you said, being positive. Like some people, maybe they are successful, but like they're just negative, grinding, not nice people.
Yeah.
That also it can be very detrimental. I mean, in medicine, in particular, in med school, I can think of a lot of circumstances where, you know, people were successful, but the way that they were going about it was not really healthy, right? It was like, we're always competing with each other. You're comparing, you're kind of putting other people down in order to kind of get to that next level. And I had to recognize when just because someone was successful, if I didn't like their vibe, right? If I didn't like, how they were as a human being, that doesn't mean necessarily that I need to hang out with them. But it's helpful to recognize when you see those traits in other people, things that you like about them and things that you don't like. I mean, I tell my residents all the time when they're in clinical practice, you're going to be training with people where you might be like, I really like the bedside manner that this doc has. And then I really like the clinical expertise with how this particular doc is efficient and doing shoulder reductions or intubating or whatever they might do. Like everyone's going to have strengths. So you want to look at the strengths of everyone and their weaknesses so that you can craft like how you want to mold. And that includes who you hang around. So I definitely think the hardest thing is kind of shedding the expectation of your social circles from high school, because a lot of that you're born into. And then you have to make a decision when you get into college, which is kind of the target range that you're talking about, is, who's going to be the family I choose? Who are the people that are my people? And it does have a significant impact on how you will perform in life and how you will enjoy life if you're not careful about who you surround yourself with.
Fantastic. And I think going back to the overachiever aspect of what a lot of my students and a lot of yourself may be experiencing, how have you started to define what success looks like? I mean, I can tell you I've struggled with that throughout because I'm a perfectionist. So
Yeah.
I'm always going to be disappointed, and I am my own worst critic. And I revisit decisions all the time, which I shouldn't. But I'm curious as to like, what is victory for you? Is that exiting? Is that practicing medicine? Is that one day being on a beach? Like, what do you view as victory?
Yeah, it's hard because like you said, I think our kind of type A overachieving type of, entrepreneur or just person, they always are leveling up their goals. So it's like I'm never going to reach the finish line. Like at first it was to raise my first million. Now I'm in a $4 million raise. And so I'm like, I guess I need to, be focused on Series A where I might be raising $20 million. And that's my new fundraising goal. And initially, I think I had dreams of exiting this company for 50 million, but now I know how large the market size is. We're, exploring NasaClip as a drug delivery platform. And I'm like, heck, I think I can have a unicorn $1 billion exit because that then will position me to, be able to be someone that invests in other women and people of color, which is the sustainable generational wealth that I would like to leave a legacy to my children. And so it's hard because it's like I'm chasing a moving car, like the goals keep leveling up. So that's what brings me back to my first point, which is that you have to be successful along the way. And in many regards, I'm already successful, right? I've already become a physician, I've already become a founder, I am already a mother. And I'm already enjoying life. I mean, I live a life of luxury compared to like the vast majority of people, especially women, especially Black women who live on this earth. And so I think that I need to acknowledge and enjoy that and recognize my success now. But I don't think it's necessarily bad that I'm always chasing a bigger, better dream.
This is fantastic. Now, this series that is kind of an experiment, and I'm known for that. It very much for me is like my love letter to the Oberlin community. Like this is my first act even at the university, right? You are the first special guest, and my first class is tonight. But if you had like a suggestion or an article or something that you would recommend to an Oberlin student to maintain a positive attitude, what would
Mhm.
it be?
Yeah, so there's a book that was pretty instrumental in me getting through that really challenging time I mentioned around 2020 when I was building the business, going through a divorce, raising two young kids, and it was called Sabbath by Wayne Mueller. And I'll make sure that you guys get links and that Doug can push that out to you. And this book is about the disease of busyness that we have in our society. At the time, my calendar looked like a rainbow exploded. There was like no downtime anywhere, any day. I mean, I was an ER doc, so we worked nights and weekends. I mean, it was like it was not something that I could maintain for a long time, but I didn't even realize how detrimental it was to not allow myself to have a day of rest, a day where I could process, a day where I could organize my thoughts, a day where I could recuperate, and how beneficial that would be to me moving forward. Historically, if you think about it, it's really unprecedented as a human being to be constantly digesting
Yeah.
the amount of information that is pushed at us all the time. Like, we're not evolutionarily built to deal with it. And so you're going to have extreme cases of burnout when there's not rest. I mean, not even a couple generations ago, when it got dark, you went to bed because it was dark and like there wasn't that much electricity, or maybe there was no electricity where you were. And so you had to go to sleep and you had to rest and you got up with the sun and you had weekends where, you were not expected to be responding to texts and emails and, having people get irritated if they didn't respond to you immediately. So this book recentered me and understanding like what's important and where do I rest. So I currently practice a day of rest on Mondays because I can't protect weekends a lot because I still work clinically on my weekends. Monday's like the worst day ever in the ER. So the secret's out to my schedulers. I never want to work on Mondays in the ER because it's like the worst day. But and I can't always protect a full day, but I protect a half day on Mondays where I schedule no meetings, no calls. And it doesn't mean I have to go to the store or I have to do laundry. It's true unstructured time. And I think that that is essential. And I really wish I'd had that practice earlier on. I think it would have paid dividends even more than it has since I started, adopting that practice, as I really took off with NasaClip. So I highly recommend that book. You can listen to it on Audible or read it. And I encourage you all to, find wherever your Sabbath can exist and to practice that.
Fantastic, Liz, and true story to just reinforce the point you raised. My students will learn I have three toddler sons, and for whatever reason, they would not go to bed at 2 and 3 in the morning. I'd find them having their little parties and siestas with Alexa. So I literally had to pull the light bulbs out of the room to make it go black so that they would go to sleep, so that they would, recharge their battery. And I think that that's a quite funny, literal representation of, the modern world we have and the modern solutions we have that won't let us actually go into our natural state
Right.
of rest. So really thank you for sharing that. So I know you're actively fundraising, you're actively building, you're actively promoting NasaClip. If any of the community at large in Cleveland or in the Oberlin community, there could be in potential investors or even maybe developers or designers that are interested in helping you. Maybe even one day we get you enough money, there could be some internship opportunities for some of my students.
Absolutely.
If they want to get in touch and learn more about NasaClip, how do they do that?
Yeah, so first, if you're interested in learning more about NasaClip or you'd like to purchase NasaClip because you know somebody with nosebleed problems, you can go to nasaclip.com, NASACLIP. I would encourage everyone to follow us on all of our socials. We have a great deal going on right now with Black History Month and a lot of really amazing PR that's coming out this month that I'm excited about. If you'd like to get in contact with me, please email me. My email address, again, I'll make sure it's like linked to the lecture, is eclayborne, ECLAYBORNE at nasaclip.com. And I certainly welcome anyone who's interested in investing. We have a seed raise that's going on right now. We've closed a little bit over half of our $4 million raise. And then obviously our focus right now is definitely sales of NasaClip, both in the kind of B2B hospital urgent care, EMS, school nurse, sports medicine, as well as the everyday consumer that can, purchase it on nasaclip.com now. So I welcome both, interested consumers or people who would like to buy NasaClip or help get NasaClip into their systems, as well as anyone who might be interested in investing. And then I will extend the offer that I mentioned. If you are just someone who wants to learn more from my journey or would like some advice, feel free to email me, and I'm happy to kind of touch base with you and help you however I can. There were several people along my journey that lifted me up, and so it's always important for me to look back and make sure that I'm bringing people along with me as I continue to rise.
Fantastic, Liz. Now, I've had the luxury of asking all the questions of the brilliant doctor here, and I don't want to monopolize her time. So I don't know if Anand or Eric or MJ, if you have any questions, you can throw them in the chat. Gareth, maybe do you have a question for Dr. Claymore? No? Okay, okay. No, no questions in the room here, but let's see. No, I think there's no questions here, Liz. Pretty clear. I think your journey is very inspiring, and I really look forward to seeing your career develop. And for me, I do hope you one day don't average up the mountain and actually take the victory lap that you deserve. Kudos to you.
Well, I have a question for you, Doug, since we're building our relationship both personally and professionally. What are some of the things that you've like reflected on or been able to think about differently, having done this interview with me that really resonated? Or can you speak a little bit to you and how you've approached wellness, resilience, and kind of being positive in the face of adversity during your career?
Yeah, so this is an excellent question. So I've had different eras in my career where, there was kind of the little Cleveland kid that thought he could. Then there, as time went on, undergraduate, being an athlete, then turning into getting my MBA, and then corporate and so beyond. And later becoming a father. I'll tell you this, Liz, I have always by nature been a glass half full. Like I am that style type. But the challenges of any of those phases, it can kind of lead to these peaks and valleys of even, a person's mental health or your level of optimism. Now, my comment is if you're going to try to do the impossible, or if you're a creative, or if you're a musician, you need a lot of optimism. And I would say that what resonated a lot with me that I think you said finding your Sabbath or having a day of rest, because it can be a very tense and emotionally draining state to be a leader, to meet the expectations of the masses, and to take punishment. And, people talk about being bulletproof. Yeah, but you'll get cracks in your armor. The best of us do. But it's all about, I think, having the family and the inner circle around you. I also think that what you talked about for me of having, a mentor is mission critical. I think a lot of people make the mistake of looking at someone like you or me and think that they're just strong and they just did it themselves. And that is not ever the case. We're social creatures. I've had amazing mentors. I mean, my father, who's passed, a lot of my activities in entrepreneurism, I can see where he set me up to do it, but it was my response to the negative effect of him dying led to me dedicating my life to making sure that other entrepreneurs don't fail. And that's a significant transition from a negative event in my life. So yeah, I would say I think those are the things that resonate most with me. And 100%, I think I work with a lot of female founders, and what's amazing even more about you is that a lot of them I assist in non-traditional forms of fundraising, like crowdfunding, because that is how they process trying to get around the fact that the VCs don't give them money. The fact that you've already raised half of 4 million means, I mean, you're a unicorn in its own right, which is why I chose you in this series and why we started off that way. So kudos to you. You're doing the impossible. Thank you for joining this session. Just so everybody knows, this will be recorded. We will upload this to the Oberlin YouTube channel. We did run into some live streams issues. I'm going to talk with Gareth. We're going to make sure next week we're going to get that part right. But we will upload this to Twist of Fate. And Liz, again, kudos to you. And I look forward to seeing you in Bay Area very soon. And you having a Twist of Fate episode with us and our broader community. So thank you so much for today.
Thanks for having me, Doug. This has been a pleasure, and I really hope, that if, at the very least, this is something that can inspire or uplift or just plant a seed for somebody that helps them to flourish along their journey.
Okay, awesome, Liz. For everybody, stay tuned. I know we're starting small. We're going to promote this really big on campus. We really want to see you out here in room and or on Zoom. We're bringing founders and entrepreneurs together to talk about how we're going to make the world a better place with the Oberlin Executive Series, Speaker Series. Take care. Bye.